Classic Hardcore takes you back to the simpler times of playing World of Warcraft, back away from expansions to where the game began all those years ago. No longer is it about Basilis, rushing to endgame or min-maxing. Hardcore encourages you to take the game at a much slower and calculated pace, and so far that's been a very enjoyable and replayable change of pace. But with us reverting back to classic vanilla once again, that means that certain additions made baseline in future expansions have been patched out of the game, and some of these additions were pretty nice to have actually. So today I thought I'd put together a useful list of add-ons that are sure to help anyone looking to upgrade their hardcore experience. I've tried to include a variety of add-ons here, from things that are specifically useful for hardcore to just add-ons that are generally good for the vanilla version of the game, which I wouldn't want to go without. But before we go on, a quick word from today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends is a game I bet you've heard of once or twice, and with hundreds of champions to collect, PvE and PvP gameplay, as well as an RPG battle system, it's no wonder why. One of the toughest bosses in Raid is the clan boss named the Hydra. Each head has different effects and will pose challenges for members of your party. The Head of Suffering, for example, has a special ability called Pain Link. This causes a member of your team to share some of the boss's damage taken with themselves, meaning you'll need to find a way to remove this effect to take this head down. The Head of Mischief turns your own party's power against them. If it ever gets a turn where you have a fully buffed champion, it can steal all of those buffs and spread them to the other Hydra heads, completely turning the tide of battle. And the Head of Wrath is quite straightforward but needs to be approached carefully. After being hit 15 times, it will triple its attack power until the end of its next turn, so it's best to only use hard-hitting attacks against it. As per usual in Raid, there is always new things happening. This month you can get your hands on the Stag Knight, as well as a unique skin designed for this champion by JonTron by using promo code JTSkin before October 7th. On top of that, there is a new legendary champion for grabs, Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. Simply log in on 7 different days between now and October 23rd to add him to your collection for free. With all of this and more content always being added to Raid, there's never been a better time to start. You can do so by clicking the link in the description or by scanning the QR code on screen to get huge bonuses, including the epic champion Drake, energy refills, skill tomes, XP boosters, and more. Many thanks to Raid Shadow Legends for the sponsor today. Let's get back to WoW. First up is an add-on which truly enhances your hardcore experience, and in some ways lets you know what you need to be careful of on your own journey. Best of all, the more people that use it, the more data it will gather, and the more death notifications you will see. I'm of course talking about the Death Log. This is probably the single best add-on you can get for the hardcore game. Death Log simply turns player deaths into stats. It does this by showing the most dangerous areas in the game as heat maps, detailing information as for overall class stats, showing which are statistically the most dangerous mobs in the game, and much more. There is a ton of information here, but the most entertaining bit for classic hardcore have to be the death notifications. So this was something the hardcore add-on used to do between members of your guild on the unofficial realms, but Death Log will send notifications realm-wide. These notifications will show the class, level, location, last words, and the cause of their untimely demise. And if you do want the full Death Log experience, join the /world chat channel so that you can see other people press F to pay their respects to the fallen, or just a laugh at the misfortunate. It's usually the latter, to be honest. Also, you can move /world to another window to avoid some of the spam. That's probably a good idea too. One more thing about Death Log is that you should amend the minimum level to show notifications, or it's just constantly on your screen. Somewhere in the region of levels 20 to 30 seems like a good starting point. Next up is an add-on which I'm a big fan of called Classic Bestiary. In short, what this does is display enemies' abilities beneath their frame. Keep in mind this is not perfect by any means. There are so many different variations of mobs which have abilities such as Enrage, Net, Frostbolt, and so on, and the full tooltip the add-on will display often does not exactly match what the mob will do. However, just having a rough idea what an enemy can do in the first place is very useful. For example, if you pull two enemies which have a root ability, they can easily chain together that root and keep you in place for far longer than expected. Some enemies have fear effects or mind controls that they will use when multiple units are nearby. This can make grouping for some quests very dangerous. Other mobs will have an execute, which can really take you by surprise when you're on low health. Again, it's not a perfect add-on, but at least it allows you to take an educated guess and avoid potentially dangerous situations. Speaking of dangerous situations, at some point you may decide you want to run some of Classic's dungeons, at which point you'll have to deal with the endless wall of spam in the LFG or world chat channels, which is not all that great to be honest. But the LFG bulletin board makes things far less painful. It's no automated system that came in future expansions, but basically it cuts down all that chat spam massively and makes actually finding a group pretty simple. Just go into the options on the top right of the UI under add-ons, unselect pretty much everything, pick the dungeon you want, reopen the add-on and see what is being run. You can also resize the add-on and move it to the side somewhere, so you can keep track of groups that are forming while you're still out questing. Very useful add-on this. Having just talked about dungeons, it seems a good time to talk about threat. We are playing classic vanilla here. Threat is a big mechanic. You can't play the game pretending it's not a thing when you're grouping up. And the further you progress into your hardcore journey, the more important this mechanic becomes to be careful of. And nearly everything generates threat, from the obvious such as dealing damage or healing, to things you may not expect such as restoring mana or buffing. Also, keep in mind as a player in melee distance, you have to do 110% or more of the current tank's threat to take aggro, and as a ranged player, you have to deal 130%. So how are we going to know how much threat you've generated? Well, that's where some variation of a threat meter comes in. There are a number of different ways you can check on threat, from using a nameplate add-on such as Plater or Threat Plates. These are arguably the best as they allow you to see the state of multiple enemies at the same time. In fact, if you're playing a class with strong AoE, basically just talking about mage here in Classic, aren't I would go for one of these. Otherwise, the Tiny Threat Details plugin works fine and allows you to see where you're at when it comes to threat. But whichever way you decide to track threat, I think it is a good idea to do so. Next up, it kind of goes without saying that you're going to need some kind of questing add-on for Classic, unless you really want to be reading every other quest and trying to figure out where you're going. Questy is a very good starting point. It won't show you exactly where you need to go for every step of the way, but it will outline where quest objectives take place on the map, where quest givers and hand-ins are, and all those various details. This is a really good add-on to have. So something you may have noticed about Classic Hardcore so far is people asking for layer all of the time in the chat. So what's that about? Well, in short, layering is Classic's answer to certain zones becoming overcrowded, and each layer within the game functions as an entire copy of the game world. When you log in, you are assigned a layer, and sometimes you may want to change that layer for a number of reasons, such as looking for mining or herb respawns, to reduce competition for quest mobs, to search for a rare spawn, whatever it may be. The Nova World Buffs add-on lets you see which layer you are on, how many layers there are in total, which layers guild members are on, and much more. You do need to target an NPC, usually in Stormwind or Orgrimmar, for the add-on to recognize your layer at first though, but you can do that on a bank ult. After that, you will know. There is a scaling cooldown on layer hopping, of course, to prevent abuse of it, but it's something that can be useful here and there. Next are a set of add-ons to make enemy unit frames basically just not terrible. There's a lot of great things about vanilla and vanilla leveling, but enemies having mystery amounts of health with no cast bars is not one of them. Well, for me at least. To restore all the details you would want to see from enemies, you need a few separate add-ons here. Modern Target Frame brings back enemy health values to be seen once again. Classic Aura Durations shows the duration of remaining buffs and debuffs, and makes your own debuffs more visible on the target. Classic Cast Bars puts cast bars back on enemies once again. This isn't a perfect add-on, sometimes enemies use lower ranks of spells and their abilities go off faster than planned, but it's good to see. And finally is an optional one, but one that I always recommend, Omni CC. This shows major CC effects over an enemy's frame, for things such as stuns, interrupts, and so on. I just think it makes them more visible and prevents things from being overlapped. Next up is an add-on to improve chat a little bit, and to be honest, I really just use it to see class colors in chat, but it's called Prat. There was a command that used to turn class colors on or off in your chat box, but I couldn't seem to get it working in vanilla. Either way, this add-on will do the job, as well as providing a bunch of other options for your chat. Next up, personally, I like an add-on for the auction house, as I think the basic classic version just isn't very good in terms of how it displays items, their bid, their buyout prices, all of that stuff. I use Auctionator, which gives you a few new tabs on the auction house interface. On the selling section, you can click items from the interface and it will automatically list them at the current lowest offer. Often you want to amend this a little bit so you're getting what the item's worth, but it saves a lot of time in listing things. And on the buy tab, you can search all items under a certain name. For example, if you search healing potion and then go to the loads more options at the bottom, the add-on will do a scan for all the items which share the same name, so then you can go and find the best healing potion for your level without having to go through all the tabs on the usual auction house or having to remember the item's exact name. It also lists your previously searched items so you can go back and buy repeat items easily. There's also another tab which allows you to cancel auctions with one click too. It just saves a lot of time and makes navigating the auction house easier, in my opinion. On to some general quality of life things now. Leatrix Plus first. You could do a whole video on this add-on, it has so many options to toggle. I use it to enhance interfaces such as on the quest, professions, trainers, and so on, just so they're much larger and a bit easier to look at. You can also improve the speed at which you loot items, as for some reason without an add-on it's noticeably slower. It also sells junk from your bag automatically. Leatrix Plus does do many things, well worth a look through to see what you can get it to do. I also have Leatrix maps. It's a preference thing, I suppose, to have a map which pops up and looks like this, as opposed to the vanilla one which covers your entire screen. There are a bunch of different bag add-ons to help sort them out. The one I use is Bagnon. This combines all your bags into one, as well as including a sort feature that will attempt to organize your bags, because after you've been grinding mobs for a bit, your bags invariably turn into a complete mess of random items. The next two add-ons are ones which I've mentioned fairly recently, but I rate them and this is an add-on video, so I'm just gonna cover them again really quick. First is What's Training. This puts a new tab on your spellbook where you can see which abilities you can currently train at your level and which ones you have to think about in the future. Ranking up or learning entirely new spells can often be the difference between a close call and a visit back to the starting zone, and this add-on lets you keep track of when you should really be going back to train. Next is Spellbook Abridged. This automatically ranks up spells on your action bar as you learn them, so you don't accidentally forget and use a low-ranked spell for half a dozen levels or something. It also collapses all ranks in your spellbook too, so it's a bit easier to browse through. This add-on is mainly the auto-ranking feature for me, as I find it really useful. Finally is Mini Map Button Bag. Every single add-on for some reason has a little icon that they want to put on your mini-map, and either you can go and turn them off manually or they just kind of turn into a complete mess after a while. Mini Map Button Bag makes it so all these little icons are stored in a much easier to read manner, and it just saves you time in general from having to sort it out yourself. Just a small quality of life add-on really. And that is about it. As is nearly always the case with add-ons, there are multiple ways to achieve the same goal, but these are simply what I'm used to and what I use. I hope you found something new here and something which you can use to help you out on your hardcore journey. Thanks once again to Raid Shadow Legends for the sponsor. You can check them out via the links in the description. But as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all on the next one very soon.